The big worry for me, I would say even a likelihood during my lifetime, is a big epidemic.
There will be a surprise outbreak.
Greater Melbourne is under a stage 4 lockdown for 6 weeks until the 13th. And that means sweeping new restrictions, including a 9...
Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is enacted by Section 8(1) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago that the President may from time to time make a proclamation declaring that a state of emergency exists, and whereas the President has by proclamation made on the 15th day of May 2021 declared that a state of public emergency exists in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and whereas it is enacted by Section 9(1) of the Constitution that within 3 days of making the proclamation, the President shall deliver to the Speaker for presentation to the House of Representatives a statement setting out the specific grounds on which the decision to declare the existence of a state of public emergency was based, and a date shall be fixed for a debate on this statement as soon as practicable, but in any event, not later than 15 days from the date of the proclamation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House take note of the statement by the President under Section 9(1) of the Constitution, setting out the specific grounds on which the decision to declare the existence of a public emergency was based. Madam Speaker, I do not know if there is any person in Trinidad and Tobago today who does not know that there is a matter of national interest with respect to a virus which is threatening human beings here in Trinidad and Tobago, and the threat being one that could make persons very sick or bring about their demise through death. Madam Speaker, in recent years, scientists have been working very hard on warning that given the huge improvement of interaction between human beings on this planet, that viruses and bacteria, particularly viruses, pose a real threat to the human population as the population grows around the world and as travel times have been reduced between one population and another. We recently, Madam Speaker, had the experience with SARS, which was an infection that was very threatening. We had also MERS, which was also very threatening, small microbes threatening human populations. And of course, Madam Speaker, we've had fairly, thankfully, infrequent outbreaks of Ebola, which was confined to certain areas in Africa. But whenever there's an outbreak like SARS or MERS or Ebola, the world's population gets very nervous and is very exposed. So when we were informed towards the end of 2019 that there was an outbreak of a virus in China, and that outbreak was deemed to be an epidemic in one part of China, the world did take notice. But what was interesting, Madam Speaker, was that the virus which caused this outbreak in late 2019 was a new virus, meaning that it was a virus that had never been known or seen to exist in the human population anywhere in the world. And therefore, it was particularly threatening because it being new, the human population did not have inbuilt mechanisms to firstly recognize it and to react to it in a defensive way. That sort of thing, Madam Speaker, biologically around in animals and humans, usually require some time for the life forms to recognize the threat and to respond. I would not, Madam Speaker, pretend to be an expert in human biology or in medicine, but this has been described so frequently in the last year that I'm sure, Madam Speaker, that many people, or most people, have an idea of what is involved, that the virus gets into your body and your body responds to it, and if you don't respond, it could have the effect of damaging your organs, and once your organs fail, it could result in death. And sometimes, Madam Speaker, this could take place in a very short period of time. So here we were, approaching 2020, and by January 30th, 2020, the WHO declared this outbreak of the coronavirus as a public health emergency of international concern. And Madam Speaker, because we were paying attention to it here in Trinidad and Tobago, the following day, a proclamation declaring the novel coronavirus 2019 NCOV as a dangerous infectious disease. That was done, Madam Speaker, on the 31st of January. And, Madam Speaker, the rest of the world, particularly those of us who are responsible for our local populations, were paying attention to what the WHO was doing and was saying, and hoping that it remained in that part of the world. But we were quickly abused, Madam Speaker, of any expectation that it would remain in Asia, because very quickly it was picked up in Europe, and we were almost certain to be exposed to it because of our connection to Europe by way of international, particularly airline travel. On February 11th, Madam Speaker, in 2020, the virus was given a specific name, COVID-19, and 1 month later, the virus was then known to be threatening every country in the world and was therefore declared a pandemic. Madam Speaker, since then, all our lives have changed. Because, Madam Speaker, it was not something that we knew enough about. We were required to be responding to it while learning about it and while experiencing its dreadful outcome. I may remind you, Madam Speaker, that we here in Trinidad and Tobago, like the rest of the world, looked on in absolute horror when in Bergamo in Italy, one of the most modern locations in the world, with about the most modern health system in the world, in Europe, in the European Union, where all the resources were available, all the technical information available, the most experienced people in the world were all in panic station, because this virus was in fact bringing about a level of mortality where, if it was not controlled, could have had record-breaking deaths among the human population. And in this particular Italian city, Madam Speaker, while the rest of the world is looking on and wondering what will happen to us when it gets to us, there were situations developing in that city that were so horrible that the people there could not bury their dead. They had to get outside help. And before you knew it, Madam Speaker, the virus was in every Western country. It was in North America. And we here at the beginning of 2020 literally were waiting to determine when we would be exposed to it. And as anticipated, Madam Speaker, very early in 2020, we did have to report that we had our first case of the infection in our country. And seeing what it had done elsewhere, Madam Speaker, we had to take action here in Trinidad and Tobago to protect ourselves from that potential for devastation that other people were in fact experiencing, even as we here in Trinidad and Tobago were having low numbers. In a very short space of time, Madam Speaker, by March, we were in a situation to have to close our border, because knowing that the virus was going to come into our population from somewhere, and that we could not protect ourselves in any physical way by putting up barriers and screens and whatever, or telling people not to come and so on. What we had to do, Madam Speaker, was to close our border so as to reduce, if not eliminate, but reduce the rate at which, or the incidence at which, the virus will enter our population if international traffic was not curbed and managed. And that is what, Madam Speaker, brought about the border closure, where we were managing the entry into our population of persons who were on the outside at the time when we took that decision. Madam Speaker, I want to remind this country that our census would have shown to us at some time that we have approximately 1.3 million people inside Trinidad and Tobago. But outside, we have approximately 330,000 people, all of whom can claim access to Trinidad and Tobago by law, as citizens or residents. And of course, Madam Speaker, many of them come to us on a regular basis, especially at times like Christmas and Carnival, or for family events and so on. So we do know that. But the danger that was facing us with respect to the devastation of coronavirus-19, COVID-19, was such that we literally had to close the door so that those who were in would enjoy a level of protection, while those who were out would have enjoyed, I shouldn't say enjoy, but experience a certain amount of inconvenience as we over time manage their return in a safe way, including quarantine in Trinidad and Tobago, where the government played a major role in carefully repatriating people, and that process is still going on. Madam Speaker, in a jiffy, we too were reporting fairly rapid numbers growing among the population, because up to then, Madam Speaker, the experts were not sure how this virus was being spread. Initially, our reaction was that all we knew, it was being spread from person to person without a vector. And of course, soon after, we discovered that it could be spread by individuals infecting themselves by coming into contact with the virus, which may be on surfaces. So our first reaction was to be particularly careful about surfaces, touching surfaces, and using our appendages, our fingers, or whatever it is, and touching our noses and mouths, because that is where the virus will pass to enter each individual body. So we started out with health protocols, which are still in place, Madam Speaker. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, don't touch your eyes, and so on, Madam Speaker. Super sensitivity, super sensitization, and super use of the products that can kill a virus. So, Madam Speaker, soon after that, the experts will tell us that the virus is in fact able to be transmitted by aerosols, droplets coming from persons speaking to persons. Initially, Madam Speaker, we didn't know that. So I distinctly recall when we had our first press conference, or one of the early press conferences on this virus, there was one member of the media who was wearing a mask. And it was literally joked at as though he was being very overly frightened by the item. And that one person wore that mask to a few press conferences, because at that time we didn't know how effective masks were in preventing the virus from going from person to person. But soon after, Madam Speaker, the tests around the world in the various universities and hospitals would have shown that because of the virus being able to be transmitted in small droplets, which can get from one person to another by simply being close enough as they speak, that the wearing of a mask is useful in preventing that. And then soon after, it was confirmed that the virus can be in aerosol form, not just droplets, but literally as aerosols blowing in the wind around. And of course, Madam Speaker, by then, it was confirmed that the wearing of a mask is in fact our best defense. And we initially as a population took the position that we will accept under the public health ordinance that certain protocols could be established so as to encourage the population to understand that the response to this very dangerous virus is personal, it's individual responsibility, and that you should wear a mask to protect yourself. And very many people in this country did that, Madam Speaker. But then eventually, it became an imperative that all of us must do it. And we eventually had to make it mandatory by law. So as you see, Madam Speaker, we were learning about this threat along the way. And of course, in the meantime, Madam Speaker, we had the unpleasant announcement to be made that we had our first death. National population had to join the rest of the world, where one person had died in Trinidad and Tobago from COVID-19. And we knew then that we were, in fact, on record as being a country that was infected by COVID-19. But the government had taken a number of steps, not hesitating to take those steps to reduce the rate at which the population was infected and also to deny the virus a free run in the population. How long that would have been, Madam Speaker, nobody knew. But what we did know in the scientific community was that if the population was vaccinated, where vaccines are items of microbial nature, very small, introduced into the body, having the same kind of gene structure as the virus, or in some instances, the inert virus introduced into the body deliberately to cause the body to respond by developing antibodies so that in the event that you get infected, you are in a better position than we were in January in the whole world, where it was the novel coronavirus affecting a human population to which the virus was completely unknown and for which the body was defenseless. So, Madam Speaker, the international scientific community started to produce or to determine what had to be produced by experiments and by tests and so. And later in 2020, we were getting the news from the particular locations that that vaccines were possible to be had, and eventually coming out of the UK from Oxford, the first vaccine was confirmed and approved, and today, Madam Speaker, there are about four or five vaccines that are approved and are in widespread use around the world. But the bottom line, Madam Speaker, is that during that period of 2020, all over the world, I cannot think of a single country which has reported confidently or at all that we are without or have not been touched by coronavirus. It had in fact been a true pandemic in our time. In our time, Madam Speaker. And for many of us, it is the first time that we have had to deal or to be exposed in this way. Madam Speaker, before there was a virus, the most that we could have hoped to do was to protect ourselves from being infected at all. And that is like drawing water with a sieve, because it is very difficult. It is very difficult in today's world to isolate yourself completely. As long as you are in contact in any way with the rest of the world, within your community and on your border and international transportation, you were exposed. And Madam Speaker, every country in the world has been affected, and different countries were affected in different ways, and different countries responded in different ways. There is no singular response except the tested and tried protocols which many of us are following. But we do not have responses to say, well, turn this switch and it turns it off. Turn this other switch and it turns it on. Every country has had to respond to the challenge. Some countries took the position initially that leave it alone and it will inoculate itself. The population will inoculate itself by it will pass through, and the common phrase now is herd immunity. But in the meantime, in attempting to get herd immunity, Madam Speaker, the accompanying outcome of that was massive deaths. And one or two countries who took that position, after facing the reality of going that road, drastically changed and eventually started taking disruptive rectification, completely different. Some maintained the course and counted the dead people in humongous numbers. In Trinidad and Tobago, we decided that we will encourage the population to be informed, to be involved, and to do what we could do at the personal level, in partnership with the state at the state level, and together we maintain some level of response that will not see us being overwhelmed by the virus, but also that for those who unfortunately are infected by the virus and require health care, we put in place, Madam Speaker, certain arrangements to have that health care while we also encourage the population to avoid being infected. Madam Speaker, we have gone to a state of emergency because after a year and with the coming of vaccines, we as a population, we found that we relaxed a bit. We were not as diligent as we could have been, but even so, even in the most diligent areas in the world, we are seeing tremendous outbreaks requiring firmer and newer responses. But it came to pass, Madam Speaker, that after a year of relatively low numbers of infection and low numbers of deaths, where each one was mourned and concerned about, but we did have, for example, by the time we got to February of 2021, Madam Speaker, having had a spike during August of last year, August into September, where we had the general election, and there was a bit more mixing than we could have done without. We did have a spike there, but we very quickly suppressed that, and by September into October, that was down to relatively low numbers, and we canceled Carnival, because all of these, we understood that the danger we were facing is a mixing of the population and movement of people around in a population where the virus existed. If we did have that kind of thing going on, you would have greater numbers of people infected and by extension greater number of deaths. So we canceled Carnival, and interestingly enough, February we had the lowest levels of infection and we had the best compliance. I think it probably must have been the missing of Carnival, or people trying deliberately to cooperate with the no Carnival, saw us in February having the best response to the virus. And soon after that, Madam Speaker, it plateaued into March, and there were activities around March. And the next thing we saw, Madam Speaker, we had to respond while we were alert to a slow rise on the curve. By the time we got, Madam Speaker, to the requirements for a state of emergency, our curves and our projections were such that had we not intervened, or if we don't intervene, we would certainly have the kinds of traumatic results of large numbers of dead people, larger numbers of sick people, and none of which would be to the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, Madam Speaker, the responses to this virus have been very disruptive to our social life, to our economic life, but what we have been doing, Madam Speaker, is encouraging defense to a virus. We are now with the rest of the world participating in the vaccination program. Unfortunately, we are not the kinds of economy or scientific communities that have developed a virus and can make it here in Trinidad and Tobago. We have no such experience, we have no such equipment, and very few scientists working on that. And the end result is, Madam Speaker, we have to rely on the supply of vaccines in the national community. And in the meantime, Madam Speaker, we are required, as we seek to vaccinate our population to a level where the virus becomes something that can be managed given the level of inoculation that would have taken place. The experts tell us 65 to 70% of the population being inoculated would result in movement of the virus that would be not sufficiently concerning, because at that level it would be difficult for the virus to spread with any amount of, I think, vigor. But we are not there yet. And currently, Madam Speaker, we are holding the line on infection while we also work towards a higher level of vaccination. Unfortunately, vaccines are not as easily available as we would have liked, because the discovery and approval of a vaccine meant that all of us in the world were starting from zero, because once it is approved, then it starts to be produced, because nobody was going to go and produce a warehouse full of vaccines before it was approved to be used. The production came after the approval. And as soon as the approval was had, well, of course, Madam Speaker, those who had more authority, those who are richer, those who had control over the production systems, actually took control of the outputs of the factories. And it was horrible to observe, Madam Speaker, where the vast majority of people in the world who live in lower income or poorer countries, as I speak to you now, Madam Speaker, they have had access either largely by small purchases or by gifts to less than 1% of the vaccines that have been made available. And a handful of the rich countries have claimed and retained ownership for their population of over 83% of the vaccines that have been available. Madam Speaker, that's the reality we face. But in the meantime, while we fight this vaccine availability issue, we have to make sure that our population suppress the rate at which we are infected. Because to not do that, Madam Speaker, will undermine the vaccine program when we do get involved in it, and it will also result in significant hurt to our families, to our economy, and to ourselves at the individual level. Madam Speaker, this is not something that we have an option. We have committed ourselves and our financial resources to do what has to be done to fight this fight. We have committed ourselves to defend every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, young, old or medium, male or female, boy or girl. We've committed ourselves to defend each and every one of us from this coronavirus. And Madam Speaker, we've been doing that, holding the line until we are able to vaccinate our country to a level where this virus becomes, as it has the potential to be, a normal part of our human existence, but not threatening us on a daily basis with death and destruction. And Madam Speaker, that being so, the government supports what has been put here by the President in the very clear way it has been put, and we believe that the population understands why it is being done. We understand that certain amount of disruption is taking place, but it is more important, Madam Speaker, to be inconvenienced for a short while towards a permanent solution than not to do what has to be done now, so that we can get to that place of better defense as soon as possible. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I ask all my colleagues in the House to support the proclamation as put by the President, and let us move on from here as quickly as we could and begin the fight that we have to fight for all the days and weeks and months ahead, so that our population can be protected. Madam Speaker, I heard your advice as to how much debate time we have, and I have asked the leader of government business to minimize our involvement on this aspect of today's proceedings, so we can spend a bit more time on the other aspect and the other motion, which is the one about extending the period of time for which the state of emergency would apply. But in terms of the need for a proclamation, Madam Speaker, I see it as clear as day, and we need not waste too much time on whether it should have been done. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
It takes a pandemic to remind us we are each other's keeper. Regardless to our status, we all in this together. I need you and you need me. Everybody needs somebody. That's the way it was meant to be. All humanity's family, of course. The virus show us who is boss. The thing ain't care whether East Indian or African. The thing ain't care whether Chinese, Lebanese, Syrian. The thing ain't care who have million or who have none. All the thing know you are human. All are we is one, darling. Sing the thing. The thing ain't care whether East Indian or African. The thing ain't care whether Chinese, Lebanese, Syrian. The thing ain't care who have million or who have none. All the thing know we are human. All are we is one, darling. What a thing. Go man. It take a pandemic to remind us how great is our country. Regardless of a few minus, basically we are happy. Now everybody want to come back home. All of a sudden we tired Rome. It's now we know that our country nice. We want to come back to we paradise, we cry. You never miss the water till the well run dry. The thing I care whether you're old and cold or you're young. Hey. The thing I care whether you're pink, yellow, black or you're brown. The thing I care about political persuasion. All the thing know you are human. All are we is one, darling. Sing the thing. Thing I care whether East Indian or African. The thing I care whether Chinese, Lebanese, Syrian. The thing I care whether Democrat or Republican. All the thing know we are human. All are we is one, darling. What a thing. Go man. Hey. Boy. Badi bala badi bala badi. Hey yeah. It take a pandemic to remind us to focus on our hygiene. The virus is very serious. You got to be clean to the extreme. You see, we got to be responsible. We got to do what we have to do. We got to cut down on the bad habits. We got to cut down on the politics, you hear. Well, everybody out there got to do their share. The thing again, whether Muslim, Hindu or Christian. The thing I care whether you arrive or whether you come. The thing I care nothing but doctrine or religion. All the thing know you are human. All are we is one, darling. Sing the thing. The thing I care whether Muslim, Hindu or Christian. The thing I care whether you arrive or whether you come. The thing I care whether East Indian or African. All the thing know you are human. All are we is one, darling. What a thing. Go man. Hiya. Boy. Badu bala badi bala badi bang. It take a pandemic to remind us how to be contented. But we so accustomed with surplus, we feeling empty and broken-hearted. Now everybody want to open up. They say they're afraid the economy drop, but the economy could always pick back up. But when we drop, no picking up, we drop for good. So we got to put life before livelihood. The thing again, whether recession or inflation. The thing again, whether you want your dollar up or you're down. The thing I care about your economic situation. All the thing know you are human. All are we is one, darling. Sing the thing. Thing I care whether East Indian or African. The thing I care whether Chinese, Lebanese, Syrian. The thing I care who as one. Ain't that something? That's a serious song.
Honourable members, I will now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that the House take note of the statement by the President under Section 9(1) of the Constitution, setting out the specific grounds on which the decision to declare the existence of a state of public emergency was based. Member for Superior.
Now remember to wear your mask. Take care of yourself and each other.
We got to cut down on the bad habits. We got to cut down on the politics, you hear? Well, everybody out there got to do their share. Take care, whether Muslim, Hindu, or Christian.